It was about a year ago when we were talking $7 corn, and today, unfortunately, we're talking $3 corn. Now, here's the first thing that I guess I want to say to you. Don't get too discouraged just because commodity prices have come way down this summer. In fact, every year, to be honest with you, I kind of hope commodity prices reach their low in the summertime because that's when all the chemical companies, the seed companies, and the fertilizer companies are setting a lot of our prices for the next year. So if they see commodity prices are at a low, they say, ooh boy, we better not get too greedy on raising our prices. In fact, maybe we should cut the prices. So personally, that's what I'm hoping comes out of all this. And then hopefully we'll get a nice rally here this fall so we don't even have to worry about this thing. But for now, at least making some tentative plans going into 2015, we do need to be thinking about, well, what if we do have $3 corn for next year?
Well, first of all, we've got to learn from our mistakes in previous years. We've got to look at these markets. Again, we had $7 corn. How many people sold corn at $7 and then bought their fertility at the same time? If you bought your fertility when corn was $7 and then waited to market your grain until corn was $3, that's not going to be a very economical thing because the fertilizer prices are really set based on the commodity prices and where that value is going to be. So if you're looking right now at, okay, I can lock in fertilizer here, I can lock in grain here, and it's still a profitable thing for me to lock both in, that's probably the way you want to go. If you say, well, I don't know, I'm going to wait on the grains a little bit, but I'm going to buy this expensive fertilizer today, that's a very risky proposition. So that would be one thing that I would say that we need to think about going into this. If you're locking in input costs, you might want to lock in your profitability at the end by selling some grain on the other end.
Now, the biggest expense for many farmers is going to be in cash rent. And unfortunately, there are going to be some landlords that say, hey, I just don't want to lower my cash rent down. And that's where you've got to start making decisions. Is it worth it to farm these acres? And if I give it up now, do I get it back? I mean, it's a tough call. It's really, really hard to know what to do. But what I can tell you is there are a lot of other things outside having that cash rent conversation with the landlord, a lot of other things you can take a look at. And before you just start saying, well, I got to slash this and cut this and we're getting her down to this and I'm just going to cut all my expenses down to here, you can certainly do that. But here's what we encourage you to do is focus on return on investment. I don't care what I spend as long as whatever I spend, it's going to make me money.
You know, Brian talked about the biggest thing being cash rent. I think the next biggest thing is fertility and how much money we're going to invest in plant food. When we think about plant food, what is it going to take to raise the yield that we want to get to? And when we're only going to get $3 a bushel as opposed to $7 a bushel, to me, right away, that says I have to have more bushels. And if I cut back on fertility, I'm going to be cutting back on the possible amount of bushels that I can grow, and that's going to hurt me too. So if I'm lowering an expense and I'm going to lower income even more, that's something that I don't want to do. I don't mind spending the money. I don't mind having high expenses if I can get high bushels to pay for those or even more.
But here's the whole thing. We don't know if you don't have enough fertility or maybe you have too much. We don't know unless we're taking a look at a soil test. Let me give you one real quick example that we see all the time that many people just don't even get on their soil test. It's a test called base saturation. You've got to get this on your farm. A lot of people were saying, oh, we've got high parts per million of potassium. Well, you know what? That's true. But high in relation to what? And on many farms across the Midwest, we have ridiculously high levels of calcium and magnesium. So yeah, a high level of potassium is nice to say, but it's not in ratio or in balance with our calcium and magnesium. And so because of that, we don't get enough potassium in the plant. So we were finding all kinds of potassium deficiencies. You could even see visual potassium deficiencies. When you see visual potassium deficiencies, half your yield's already gone or more. So then we started doing plant tissue analysis, and even then we realized, ooh, we're still adding some potassium, but it's not nearly enough. We've got to get that base saturation K up in the 4 to 8% range. Now, the flip side of that is if you've got your K already in the 4 to 8% range, let's say it's at 6% right now, you've done a good job with this over the years, well, for 1 year, could you cut back on potassium? Yep, I bet you could. Okay, so maybe this is the year to do it if you say, boy, I don't know how I'm going to make all this work. I'm spending $30, $40 on potassium. Could I cut that? If I see your soil tests, I can look at it and say, yeah, you probably could, just for this year, just knowing that, yeah, you're going to begin depleting your soil levels. But if all you're trying to do is survive this year, that's where we've got to look at that soil test. So what I would tell you is probably the most important thing you can do over the next couple of months here before you invest a whole bunch of money in fertilizer this fall is pull good soil tests and learn how to read the soil tests. That's critically important.
Okay, fertility is definitely a big investment that you have to make to raise a corn crop. The next biggest one is seed. I look at our own farm and I know the issue we have with corn rootworms, and I've seen what's happened when we've gone away from traits and just tried to manage it with insecticide. It's not enough. We need to take 2 shots at some of those tough bugs like corn rootworms. So for me on my farm, I know I'm going to be buying a rootworm package, plus I'm going to be putting on insecticide because I've seen the difference that those things make. In fact, just a few years ago, I raised some corn with just a single rootworm trait, and I put insecticide out, and I got hammered because we have some rootworms that are resistant to the single traits, not resistant to the stack traits. I tried to save a little money, and it really cost me. I probably lost 15 or 20 bushels just on one bad decision. Well, 15 or 20 bushels, even times $3 corn, that's 50 bucks an acre or more. I can't afford to do that. If I'm getting 3 acres roughly out of a bag of corn, well, that's 150 bucks. I would have to get a $150 discount on my seed in order to justify that, and I'm not going to see that kind of discount just going away from one trait package. My dad has always said, the difference between a farmer that's successful and one that's not successful is the size of their mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes, and every year we're going to look at things on the farm and say, if I would have done this a little different, it would have made me more money. That's fine, especially when it's on a small scale to make mistakes. So you try something that's way cheaper and you say, all right, let's do it in a side-by-side and just see. Now, if it dollars out better, great. Going forward, you can do more acres of that. But maybe you save $50 on seed cost and you give up 50 bushels of yield. Wow, that's a big deal, and that's going to really cost you money. And if you lost 50 bushels of corn on your entire farm, that might be enough to take many farmers out. So you don't want to make those big mistakes that put you out of business.
Okay, here's the thing. As we've been talking to most farmers around the country about the fall in commodity prices, they're talking to us about, well, we just want to make sure that we're investing in the right technology. In other words, if we can variable rate plant, we know we have areas on our farm, for example, where we can get by with 16 or 18,000 corn plants per acre. But we also have very highly productive areas that probably need 32 or 34,000 plants. So before you just say, well, I'm going to cut all my planting populations, use the technology. And so many people have technology already in their tractor and on their planter, but it's just not being utilized. We'd really encourage you, spend some time, learn how to use those systems. Same thing with variable rate fertilizer. You can do variable rate fertilizer on your own farm with a lot of your own equipment probably. We do in our operation. It's not that tough. Just takes a little bit of know-how. Just work with somebody who can help you on those things. So the more of that kind of stuff you can do, the better you are off. I think about even automatic shutoffs on sprayers. So we don't have on all these point rows, and when you come to end rows, the overlaps and all those kind of things, that saves money. So I know it's a little investment, but you got to look at, hey, I just saved a whole bunch on my chemical bill, or I saved a bunch of my seed bill, or whatever it is. So we really encourage you, invest in the technology and get smarter so you can actually use those things to your advantage.
And then look out in your fields too. If you're not doing a perfect job planting, you may have to invest in some different equipment on your planter to make sure you're getting the seed placed properly. We're giving up big time yield out in our farm when we have doubles and triples, and when our seed depth really varies going through the field. Do everything you can to get those things just right. Oftentimes this may mean just spending more time working on your planter, getting ready for next year, or spending more time this fall working on your combine to make sure you don't have any harvest loss. I mean, this is one of those things to me, everybody gets in such a rush at harvest, we got to get things out of the field. Wow, when corn is worth less per bushel, we just can't afford to drop any of it on the ground. We've got to get out there a little earlier this year. We can't wait till corn gets down to 15% moisture. We've got to be willing to pay a little bit for drying at the elevator or wherever you're selling that corn to, because it's definitely worth it if you don't have shatter loss and ear droppage out in the field. Those things really cost us money.
So once again, we know that commodity prices have come down. We don't like it either. This isn't as much fun as it was a couple, 3 years ago, okay? But the thing is, if you're a good manager on your farm, you spend time, you learn more, you invest in technology, you can still be very successful. There is still opportunity in agriculture in our country. So don't get too down, just try to get smarter and work harder.
Well, one other thing you definitely can't sacrifice is weed control. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed coming up later in the show.